All right, I've been waiting for this. Here on the program, we have the two guys that they wear so many hats on the Dark Side of the Ring program. Producer, director, writer. They conceived of this thing. They brought it to fruition on the screen last season on Vice. It became a huge hit. And now we're back with season 2, double the number of episodes and incredible subjects this year. I will go no further but to introduce them, Evan Husky and Jason Eisner. Evan, you talk first so they know what your voice sounds like.
Okay. Hi, I'm Evan. I'm the executive producer of the show.
and Jason, say something.
And I'm Jason, I guess, director and co-creator of the show.
Okay, boy, you guys sound like you're actually being deposed in a court of law. But no, in all honesty, explain to the folks, what each one of you has done to bring this series to the screen, because it's your guys' baby. You've had a great crew, but you guys have been the force behind it.
Yeah, I guess it started, Jason and I have known each other for over 10 years now. And we both kind of grew up living parallel lives of just being like wrestling fans from when we were kids. And we just, we also got into the world of film and documentary and feature films. And we really just wanted to see the world of wrestling, covered in like a really cinematic, thoughtful way. And that's kind of where this idea started. And I was working at Vice at the time and just really wanted to do a documentary series or just anything about wrestling. And it wasn't really until Jason and I stumbled across the Bruiser Brody story and his death and all that, and basically what happened with him in Puerto Rico. And that was kind of the basis of, this could be a great story for us to look into. And then we pitched that to Vice, who had just started a TV channel at the time. And they were like, well, what other stories could we look at that are similar? And so we put together kind of a package of different stories that, spoke to the darker side of wrestling. And then we were off to the races. That was pretty much it. I mean, I'm hitting the bullet points there, but that was pretty much it.
Jason, Evan just mentioned the word cinematic, and my God, that describes it perfectly, because I've seen so many of these, I don't even want to call them documentaries, these television programs and various cable channels about wrestling with some talking heads and a few pictures from the, magazines as B-roll. But this thing, it looks like a major motion picture. And this season, I think more than ever from what I've seen, now that the network apparently has full confidence in you guys because of what a hit it was last year, but cinematically as a director, you got to be having a ball.
Well, yeah. My background comes from mostly feature film work. And like Evan said, like both of us have been fans of wrestling ever since we were a kid. And we were like, especially over the last 8 years, our friendship really blossomed over sharing stories of of wrestling past and the personal lives of wrestlers that we would come across, and we would just get really excited about those. And we knew that if we just got a camera in front of the people, in front of the performers, in front of the wrestlers and people who work behind the scenes and the family members, that they would be just such great storytellers, and they could paint the picture for an audience. But all we have to do is just really, as filmmakers, is just kind of heighten that experience and heighten those stories. So we just tried our best to kind of just give people a little glimpse or a little, a faint, memory, a picture of that memory that our subjects are telling us. And so, yeah, we have such a great time and a lot of fun coming up with how we want to present those perspectives.
Well, it's amazing because I'll let you go in a second, Evan, but just the sure. Reenactments and maybe, whatever you were going to say, but then the reenactments also are so cinematic, but the presentation overall of the fair use footage, as they say, and the way that you don't just shoot here we are in Fayetteville, Georgia, and there's the sign says, "Welcome to Fayetteville, Georgia." You put people in these locations.
Well, yeah, what I was going to say just was exactly about the reenactments. You know, one of the films that was super inspirational to us in putting the show together was Errol Morris's The Thin Blue Line, which I don't know if you've ever seen that before.
Years ago.
Yeah, it's like the archetypal true crime documentary, you know, from the 80s. And it's so, the style of that documentary is so impeccable because the interviews are shot so cinematically, and it has reenactments. And like all the reenactments are this just incredibly evocative, you know, noirish, almost surreal, and just super, super effective on like making something. Like reenactments are always, to me, super effective when they're not trying to be real, you know, because when they try to be real, they just usually fail. And so doing something kind of very stylistically, that's when, to me, it kind of transports you into this other world. And so that's kind of what we wanted to do. We wanted to take the wrestling shoot interview and apply, you know, Errol Morris Thin Blue Line to it. That was kind of the idea.
Some of the programs that you see reenactments, they try to find no-name actors that look like these people, and then they go through skits, and it's obviously phony. And for one thing, who looks like any of these people up close if you really study them, right? Nobody looks like any of these wrestlers. That's why people paid to see them. But the way that you guys do it, it puts the viewer in that spot, in that moment in time, in a kind of noirish, as you said, you know, manner, without actually expecting them to believe this is a scene from the life. It's the picture. It paints a mental picture. And then the people that are interviewed tell the stories. It's just, I really like it.
Oh, thank you. That's awesome. Yeah. And one thing too is, even like last year when we were trying to get Kevin Von Erich on board to do the story about his family, it was a little bit of a struggle at first to help him understand what our vision was. And so we just showed him a clip from the Bruiser Brody episode that we already had done. And he watched it and he was just like, oh, this is just like the Thin Blue Line. And he just completely got it. Yeah. And he like totally understood like what we were trying to do and how our reenactments were going to be like a tasteful like portrayal of their story. And so that the Thin Blue Line, we got to give a big shout out to, because that's
put it over
helpful along the way. Yeah.
Well, you know, you mentioned that he saw he had a whole new way of looking at what you were doing once he saw a clip. So many of these programs also, the word lurid comes to mind, the scandal. This is the dark side of the ring, because the stories are dark, not because it's presented as a National Enquirer type of thing. You balance things. You give everybody their say. You're not trying to take the wrestling business down. You're trying to say, because you come away, at least people who like wrestling to begin with, come away with the idea that they respect the business, but these were tragic, or sometimes just weird, but often tragic stories that happened in it. But you don't indict the wrestling business as a whole unnecessarily, like, you know, especially the media coverage after. We'll get to in just a second your debut episode next Tuesday. The 2-hour premiere, but so many of the news organizations just want to hear these steroid-addled wrestlers. They go crazy and how they're beasts and horrible. You make these people human, regardless of what they have done, New Jack, or regardless of, you know, in some of the lighter episodes, Brawl for All should be interesting. You make these people human, and then you tell the story, and you say that the wrestling business has its warts, but you don't call for the, you know, dismantling of it and the canceling of it. And it's a different viewpoint than most other programs have.
Yeah. Just the one thing I was gonna say on that is, I think, you know, for us, it's like this whole process of telling these stories and hearing the stories firsthand from family members and other wrestlers. It creates, like, you know, you really get this understanding, even with the Brawl for All, for sure. Like you understand the risks that a lot of these performers assume, you know, for this entertainment. And it's sobering in a lot of ways, you know? And I think the best compliment that we get from people on the show is like, you know, I was able to show my significant other or another family member or a friend or whoever your show, and they have a totally new understanding and respect for wrestling because they see what these guys go through, and they see that they are, just like you said, there's a human side to all of this. And that really is what the show really is. It is more so the human side of the ring than it is the, necessarily just the dark
absolutely.
and tragic side of the ring.
I'll tell you the season opener, we might as well start and talk about it. I emailed you, Evan. I didn't know what to say. Jim Cornette had no words. It's the Chris Benoit story. And a lot of people are going to say this has been done to death. It's been told to death. Magazines, newspapers, television, whatever. Why do we need to see it or hear about it again? If you haven't seen this program, you haven't seen the story. This is, you could have done 12 hours with, dates and places of this guy's first match and when they met so-and-so and this and that, or the court records or the testimonies or whatever. It has been a book, but for a 2-hour television program, a documentary, this is pretty much definitive. And not only that, but I told you guys, and I'll say it here in public in front of you. And I'm not just blowing you. I'm not even on this episode, so I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm on a number of them, but this one, I just wanted to sit back because the people that are integral to this story, the ones that are still here, are all here except one. We'll talk about that in a second. But I watched this thing, and it took me 3 hours because I had to get up and walk away 3 different times. I was crying. And not just sniffling, but crying. Wow. And not only, you mentioned showing it to family members, this is a story that anybody, wrestling fan or not, if they sit back and they watch this thing all the way through, it's one of the most disturbing, heartbreaking, words fail me, stories in any line of work or entertainment. And it's so powerful because you see the pain that all these people that are still here underwent, and they relive these memories, and everybody in this comes off as a sympathetic figure because of that. Even the people that are no longer with us. And I think Chris Jericho, who's, by the way, is the narrator for this season for all the episodes, but Jericho's heavily featured in this because he was heavily involved in the whole story from start to finish. He said, if you think that I'm going to be out here, you're upset because I'm going to be glorifying a murderer, well, then stop watching now. And that tells it, because I knew these people, all of them personally. I met Nancy before I met Chris. But even if you don't know these people, it's a powerful story. But if you did know, especially Chris Benoit, there are reasons for this, and nobody, I don't think, has presented them as well as you did. How Jericho, another quote: "If you lined 100 guys up against the wall and said which one is going to kill their family, the last guy is the guy that did it that you would ever suspect." And it's such an incredible story, and especially to get Nancy's sister. I think this is the first time that I've never met her. She's the one person in this really that I've never met. But is this the first time in the mainstream that she's been involved in something of this scope?
In the mainstream, I think, yes. She has done one interview on Chris Jericho's podcast prior to this, which was, which for us, when we heard, we definitely, wanted her perspective in the story, or to be in our story for sure. Yeah. So this is the first time on camera she's really done anything.
Dean Malenko is featured, Chavo Guerrero Jr., Jericho, obviously, Nancy's sister, Sandra. You even got, this is another thing. You do the deep cuts, guys. You even got the officer in Fayetteville, Georgia, that was the first responder to the scene when they asked for the welfare check. And you covered it. I mean, what was it like going through all this? My God, it's so heart-wrenching.
Oh yeah, it was. It definitely wasn't easy. But we can talk a little bit about how the project came together. Because basically the start of it was it was part of the plans for season 1 as something we wanted to do. And if you remember, Jim, we were supposed to do more episodes for season 1 originally, and it got cut down. And so we had to kind of put this project on hold to see what would happen with the season 2. And thankfully, we were given that opportunity. And then, but I'm so glad that we did wait to do it, because I don't think it was something we were ready for at all at that time. And I don't even think we kind of earned to even tell that story yet in some ways. I know it sounds kind of weird, but in some ways. And then, but during that time in season 1, I had met Chavo Guerrero Jr. and I was introduced to him, and we started talking about this idea of doing this story. And we sort of hit it off, right away. We showed him the Bruiser Brody episode before it was finished, and he was super on board with that. And then after season 1 came out, we were kind of waiting to see if this would sort of take off into another season. And we had actually been developing this story on the side as maybe potentially a project we would bring elsewhere if we didn't get another season, because it's the story we really, really wanted to tell. And so we had spent many months researching it and developing it and trying to figure out how we would tell it. So then when we got the call to do season 2, we just were off to the races. And it really, Chavo Guerrero, who's actually a producer on the project with us, he's so integral in terms of, hand-holding us through this process in terms of introducing us to the right people and giving us the opportunity to build relationships with a lot of the people that are in the episode. And I just can't see us being able to do this without him. And so that was super key. And from there, it was just, a process of Jason and I just, meeting Sandra, who's, Nancy's sister, and meeting David Benoit, who's Chris's son. From
David was just incredible also at that. And it would not have been the show it is without him.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
And then of course, meeting Chris Jericho, that's how we met Chris through Chavo. And, and then of course, Dean and also Vicky Guerrero as well. And so, Chavo was just a key part of helping us to, and he really believed in us. And just, open these doors for us, because of that, which was, and that's kind of how it started. And then from there, we just started filming. And one of the things that we realized right off the bat, and Jason, you can speak to it further, is, how do you tell this story? Because this is a story that's been so sensationalized in the media for so long, and it's such a difficult story. But at the same time, it feels like the story has never been processed. It's nothing that people have really had a platform to talk about in a constructive sort of way. And so I think for us, it was it became clear that the people we were talking to really wanted to talk about this story, and they wanted to get it off their chest, and they wanted to express themselves of what they've been dealing with for the past 13 years. And so for us, it just became a story more so about the people that are still here. And that's the way we really wanted to portray it, I guess.
Well, and also you couldn't have done this in an hour. It had to be at least a 2-hour television program, minus commercials, et cetera, because you went so deep. And this is something that nobody else has really, they've talked about it, but they haven't done it. You went so deep into who Eddie Guerrero was and his life and career and death, as well as his relationship to Chris. And you were deep into the program before Eddie died. But it's such an important part as you go back and try to piece together what and why. Eddie Guerrero was such an important part of it. And I think this is the first time I've seen that he finally, at least on a broadcast production, that he finally, got the story telling that he deserved as being, an important part in all of this. And I think the fans are going to also appreciate that, because they miss Eddie, that that he's recognized in this thing. And I gotta say that I'll bring this up now. There's one person that's still around that didn't appear on camera to discuss this, and that's Kevin Sullivan. And I've known Kevin longer than I knew anybody else in this, story for 40 years. And I know what I think. What did he say to you when you tried to because obviously you tried to get him.
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, we would have loved to have had Kevin to be a part of the piece because, aside from all of the tragedy, Jason and I are just, also for so many years have been so, fans of, his character and, Nancy as a fallen angel, like all that stuff is like the best, in terms of wrestling. But, he's also a vital part of this story as well. And, we tried, and I guess all I can really say about it is it became a very complicated kind of family issue between all of the families. And it was something that I realized was just much more complicated than what just me kind of stepping in the middle of it, and basically trying to sort that. And I wasn't able to.
And that's why I wanted to say that the issue is left with, obviously, Kevin's talked about and he's seen on screen, and the story of the breakup is told. And then obviously you had to say, Kevin Sullivan was asked for comment and turned that opportunity down. So everybody comes off as sympathetic in some form or another, except for Kevin, I think, because of that. And it's not as simple as that, because I was around both these people, and I know that Kevin adored Nancy, and I know Nancy adored Kevin. And I think the way that it was left, I just wanted to make clear that their relationship was not something that she always longed to escape. Their relationship was fine until, as they often do, it went south. There was not a pattern of abuse or anything that she escaped over a 10-year relationship, but it was probably, and nobody ever knows unless they were there, but regrettable shit that happened during the breakup, not the cause of it. And I still know I've not talked to Kevin about it. I don't think I could. I don't think he can. I think one of the things that I don't think Kevin could actually sit down and talk about it to this day in public, maybe even in private, not because of wanting to protect his image, but just because of Nancy, not because of himself. And I don't want people to get, just like make Kevin the heel in the piece when there were other things going on. But, you got pretty much everybody else. And it's just, like I said, I've never had a television program, especially about wrestling, but very few, if any, that have affected me like that. Not only because I knew these people, but, it wasn't like we were daily friends. You got the daily friends. But it was just everybody's anguish over the whole thing. And trying to find reasons, which you can never fully figure out what the reasons are, but you presented all of them. And I've said every time it comes up, Chris Benoit was the nicest, most professional, most polite, quietest, best behaved guy, even in the program. He was a loving father, etc. In therapeutic levels, people say, he was on drugs. Therapeutic levels of everything except testosterone, therapeutic levels of Xanax, not that much alcohol, etc. But the testosterone was off the chart, and the hormone replacement therapy loophole in the wellness program was rampant at that point in time. But the brain damage is what poisoned that dangerous cocktail. And I've always said that he was not the same human being that he was when he did that as he had been his entire life. And I got goosebumps right now when his father showed that journal and said, "This is the diary of my son going mad."
Right. Yeah. And I also, one of the aspects I do also think, tends to get overlooked when this story has been told previously is, the mental health concerns, not just of a physical nature, but also of an emotional nature. And I think that was one of the things that, as a society, we're understanding more now than we did way more so in 2007. And that's why I think, like, and being part of this business, Jim, I mean, there's so many people, your friends and colleagues, who passed on because of, just the harshness of this business.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, I'm trying to, I can't relate to that. I don't know 50 people that have passed away, and having to process that, and I think I think grief is also, I'm not an expert in this field or anything, but I'm saying it's definitely part of the, not dealing with any of that. And of course, the loss of Eddie was a huge piece of this puzzle as well, because, I think that for him was something he couldn't accept. And that was an area we just, felt was important to shed light on.
Yeah. And I think too, with also working with our subjects, it's just having them talk about this story in such a way. I feel, I wish that this could have happened, a long time ago as well too, for people. And I think just on the subject of mental health, it's good for people to talk to each other and just try to be understanding. And I think that's a big thing we tried to do with this, is we just tried to lead with our hearts with people and just to let them open up to us in a way, hopefully, that they never really opened about it before. And I know, especially with David, it seemed like he had never really spoken about it, especially publicly in such a way. But I know just through the process of what we've done with him and talking about it and spending time with him, he's expressed to us so much how helpful it's been for him and how he's felt it's just lifted a big weight off his shoulders, And
this program is because he and Sandra have had no relationship all these years. And they have now, thanks to Jericho being the middleman and this program coming about and necessitating the everybody getting together, they have a relationship again.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was another one of the many quotes where Sandra said, "I feel I've got my nephew back."
Yeah. And, for us, it's I don't know about you, Jason, but I think being in that room when, I don't want to spoiler alert, but in that moment when you kind of realize in the episode kind of, where they've been and now them finally coming together, that was probably, I think, the heaviest moment we captured in the season, because it just was we felt like we're really kind of in the middle of all of this and part of it. And, we're in this with them too, and trying to, all process this together, and for them, obviously it's on another completely other universe, but, that was just such an interesting experience.
Well, the debut episode that we're talking about airs Tuesday night, March 24th, whenever you're listening to this, at 9:00 Eastern on Vice TV. It's a 2-hour special season premiere. I urge everybody to DVR it, because if you have a heart, you're going to have to walk away from this thing. You can't watch it all the way through. I urge everybody to watch the whole thing, but I don't see how a human being can watch it all the way through without pausing it and walking away in a couple of occasions. It's fucking heavy, guys.
It's hard, but I do want to encourage people too to hang in there to the ending, because we wouldn't have done this if there wasn't some sort of light at the end of it all.
You did. With no spoiler alert, you did manage to bring it up at the end and make people feel good about life again after dragging them through hell. And that was an art itself. And that's why I said, if you're going to submit anything for consideration, as they say, for an Emmy, guys, this is, that's another reason why you should have waited till season 2 for this. And you did, because you had some practice for that. Nobody could have, Orson Welles couldn't have done this first time out. But you've got more. There's more stuff on this season. And you've got another episode where somebody's going to be heard from on a mainstream basis that has not, at least hadn't been heard from enough, and definitely not with coverage like this. The episode on Owen Hart is going to feature, for pretty much the first time on television, Martha's side of the story.
Yeah. So, that was like right after season 1 finished, we put it out on social media. Like, what do you guys want to see for season 2? And I actually spent like a week tallying like OCD, like all of the responses into like an Excel spreadsheet to see like what people really wanted to see, like in order, and season 2 is pretty close to that list of what the top episodes were, with a couple exceptions. But Owen, was a story that people really wanted to see. It was rated number 2 on the list, Benoit being the first. But and so it was something that we really wanted to try and do. And of course, there was no way to do it without Martha and without Owen's family. There was just no way. So what we did is we reached out to Martha and sent her an email and just kind of outlining what we were looking to do. And she sent us back this email that was like the most thoughtful. It was like 10 questions. She asked me 10 questions about, the project, our background, who we are, what we're looking to do. But they were just really well thought out questions. And she's like, I'm going to be traveling for a few weeks. Don't respond right away. Just take your time and answer it, and I'll get back to you. And so I spent like 2 weeks writing like an essay on all of this, wanting to make sure, I was hitting all the right points, and, we were, leading with our hearts, as Jason said, and everything. And I sent it to her, and then she got back to me, and she was like, we would love to meet you and talk about this further. And so I went out to Calgary to go meet with Martha, and it was me, Martha, and her son Oj, and we just sat around and we ate pizza for like 4 hours, and we talked, and it was amazing. And they're just incredible people, and we just got along like right away. And it was amazing. And then we just got, plans into motion for this to be kind of our season, finale episode, which it will be. And then she trusted enough, and we just felt like this story really can't be told, without that perspective, because again, it's just one of these stories for so long that you haven't really heard her side of the story. And I know last year was the 20th anniversary, and looking back at it, I had reread her book, and I had looked, and there were other people doing podcasts and different recaps of what had happened. And you really, when you hear it from her perspective, it's such a bigger story. And there's so much more there that I think a lot of people aren't really familiar with in terms of the details of the story. And that to us was just incredibly eye-opening. And so now, in working with her, and, Oj, and Oj's sister Athena is also in the show, and so it really is kind of a family story more than anything.
Yeah, well, that's another one of these stories that has allegedly been done to death, but it's never really been done until it includes everybody. And Martha, for a lot of wrestling fans, I see on the internet that they say, well, why won't his wife agree to let Owen be put in the Hall of Fame and blah, 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 and he deserves this and he deserves that. I haven't even seen this episode. I've not seen it. Hint, hint. I haven't seen this episode, but I encourage everybody to watch it, because it's not that simple, folks. It's not like this woman just doesn't want her husband to be recognized as a famous wrestler because she's in some snit. There's a whole lot more to it than that. And I've never blamed her, and I've always taken up for her for any decision publicly that I've heard that she'd made. Well, wouldn't you if you were in the same position? But a lot of the fans don't think of it that way. They think, well, we own these people because we were fans of theirs. And it is a really, obviously, not only a tragic but a complicated story. And I'm glad that, and she never sought out publicity. She sought out compensation, which she should have, and got it. And thankfully, at least, that happened.
I mean, go ahead. I don't know. It's hard to even say if that's what she sought after. I don't want to speak for her, but I mean, I know from this, just from interviewing her, that it was much more than compensation.
Well, exactly. I mean, the kids are taken care of, but at the same time, she wanted right and the story to come out, and justice. But she was not the one that they went flocking to every time the TV news crews wanted to interview somebody about this story. And it wasn't she was trying to be on the front page of every tabloid. And so that's why I don't think a lot of people have heard the other side.
Right. And, you know, and also like, you know, in spending time with her, I know it's outside of the wrestling realm, but you also look at the work that she's done in Owen's name across the world, you know, is also really admirable in terms of the schools that have been opened and the other like philanthropy, you know, type efforts that have been made in his name and causes that, you know, she knows more than anyone else are causes that Owen supported is just is staggering. And that's just attention that doesn't get, you know, put upon. And it really does come down to this Hall of Fame situation, you know, which is, you know, when you look at the entire story, that just, you know, it's so insignificant to the human side of what we're talking about. You know,
well, we talked about when you guys were down here, you know, Owen at one point wanted to retire and become a fireman, stay home with his family and help people. And
exactly,
he could never have dreamed something like this would happen, but then he could never have dreamed that he would indirectly help so many people in so many families, in so many places through nothing to do with wrestling or even being a fireman, but he still, it's in Owen's memory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think just, you know, for us, because of that, the way the wrestling world kind of looks at it and the way that people outside the wrestling world looks at it, it makes it an interesting story to examine because there's so many different, you know, sides to this and of course what went into, you know, what went into those tragic events and everything like that. And so for us, it's just, you know, it's a story again that I feel like needs to be revisited and kind of examined in a light that it hasn't been really.
Yeah, and I think people really need to hear it from the Owens family's perspective. And like you said, Evan, like about like the amount of work they put into honoring his memory outside of venues like WWE is just unbelievable. I've never seen anyone's memory be like honored in a way that like Owen's memory has been by his family. And it's just, it's honestly really inspiring. And she's allowing us to do it as well too. And so she's found other ways to honor him, just not through the company that she wants to hold accountable for his death.
Yeah. And I think that's the direction the fans need to look in, because some things are more important than wrestling, as even I've said on occasion. But so that's going to be the season finale, right? 9 weeks down the road.